Hello, everyone. Can everyone make sure your mics are muted, please? So I think you're going to hear a lot of pinging over the next little bit as people join. My partner in crime, Cleo, she's going to be monitoring us, and she's asked the question. So let me just, I'm trying to get used to my dashboard here and get everything all set up. Cleo has put the slides up onto Google Drive for you guys. If you want to follow along, I've also updated the slides a little bit, so I'll give you an updated version later. Is it all? And then Marco has asked if he can plug his podcast to interview people here. I'll leave that up to Cleo to say yes or no, but I don't see a problem with it. Anyways, it's oh, here we go. It's about six o'clock. I want to welcome you to my home. I'm sure, like a lot of you guys, you're either trying to stay away from spreading any potential virus you may have, and or trying not to catch one. So here at the Carter household, my wife and my two sons, my 20-year-old and my 14-year-old, have been spending the last 5 days here together. So it's been exciting and interesting at the same time. So over the next little while, I'm going to learn with you guys on how to try to get this presentation delivered online and to everybody. And it looks like we're getting 44 right now. I think we're expecting about 150 people to show up virtually on this. So I'm going to be learning just as much as you guys will be. There's a chat box in Google Hangout that you can submit a question. And if I miss it, Cleo will probably just ping me a couple of times to make sure I answer it. If you have any questions as I'm presenting, feel free just to turn off your mic and say, hey, Michael, can you give me a quick second? I've got a question. If you're going to tweet about it, I've put my handle up a while ago. It's at mcarter skw or at Ryerson MDM. So Cleo, is everybody okay? Can you guys hear me okay? Just send me a quick yes or no on your chat. Yo, okay, good. I like it. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to switch off my video and go to presentation mode. And then as we go, we'll kind of get a sense of what everybody is looking for. So first off, many thanks for taking the time out of your day to come and experience this startup school. We're very proud of Startup School because it's been around for quite a number of years now. It is our way at Ryerson University to interact and communicate with you guys, and we're really proud of the fact that we've touched well over 1,000 people over the years. I'm just going to start next to, let me just, there we go. So who am I and why am I here? You know, that's always the big question of the day. And, you know, it's an interesting one because like most of you, I have a real varied background over the last 25, 30 years. You know, from my professional experience, I spent 25 plus years in the animation and visual effects business, which was a very rewarding career. I started off as an animator and worked my way up to a series producer and then a studio owner and so forth. So my experience from a bootstrapping perspective, it really comes from having to learn on the fly and trying to get a good sense of what to do right, what to do wrong, and so forth. So tonight's presentation is really going to be, a presentation on some of my mistakes and hopefully the types of mistakes you can avoid yourself. I'm also, for the last 9 years, I've been Director of Industry for the Masters in Digital Media program. And we're in the Faculty of Communication and Design at Ryerson University. So I'm really proud of the fact that Ryerson has put a lot of work into making sure that we're doing community projects such as this. And if you have any interest whatsoever in getting your master's degree in digital media, feel free to reach out to me later on afterwards. I'm happy to talk to you about that. So I want to start off a little bit with my philosophy. And the philosophy that we have, quite frankly, comes from Sean Weiss. Sean's a professor in entrepreneurship with the Startup School and at the Ted Rogers School of Management. And back in 2006, he talked about the talent triangle. And I really like this concept of the talent triangle because it combines the technical, the business, and the creative component. And as entrepreneurs, we tend to spend a lot of our time in the middle of this triangle. And sometimes we've got the skill sets that we need to do everything, but most of the time we don't have all of those skill sets. As we move forward tonight, I'm not going to be talking about developing your MVP or coming up with the latest and greatest idea. We're just going to assume that you've already validated your product or service and you're just ready to start. In order to get that going, what we're going to do in terms of making sure that you're ready to start if you don't have an idea is go to Eric Rice's Lean Startup or Alex Osterwalder's strategizer.com, and both will help you sort of formulate your ideas as you're starting to develop your idea. So as we move forward tonight, let's just assume you've got your idea already in place. So we're talking about bootstrapping, and you know, a lot of questions are, what is bootstrapping? Where does it come from, and really, what does it mean? Now, most of you have probably understood bootstrapping as something with regards to a financial component. Are you going to get your startup funded by some angel investor or a rich aunt and uncle, or are you going to put in your own cash? And bootstrapping is really doing it on your own. The approach that I'm going to take right now, however, is I'm going to talk about bootstrapping from a more operational perspective, and we're going to incorporate a little bit of the financial components as well. So the concept of bootstrapping actually originated back in the 1800s. The picture on your left here is a drawing from 1841, and the guy here pulling himself and his horse out of the swamp is Baron Munchausen, and it was said that he was able to bootstrap himself out of his predicament. And this sort of concept of bootstrapping actually had an earlier notion in the Workman's Advocate from 1834. It was said that a farmer, Mr. Murphy, was able to hand himself over the Cumberland River or barnyard fence by the straps of his boots. And that was basically, the concept of bootstrapping was basically doing something extraordinary on your own, being able to do it yourself and come out on top. This really, in the 1920s, became sort of the American approach to being able to be a successful business person, whatever your country of origin, whatever the business that you want to take on, you were able to bootstrap yourself into that business. Now, I've learned a lot of lessons over the course of many years, and one of my first lessons is this, and I think it really has to focus on where are you going to go if everything is really great. So in terms of your exit strategy, you've got a couple of things to consider. One is your exit strategy could be, what are you going to do with your partners? Are you going to sell to your partner? Number two, are you going to sell to somebody else? Or three, God forbid, maybe the company goes under, or you've done just such an amazing, thanks. Hang on. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to yell for a sec. Hey, everybody, get off the internet. I hope you guys, I've got a house full of people, and sometimes I got to remind them to get off the internet. And then close. So let's first talk about partners. So when you're starting a business, or you're starting your startup business, and you're bringing in partners, you want to be able to talk about who owns what. And we always talk about the pie and how big the pie is. So whether it's yourself bringing the idea to market, or whether or not it is you and a partner, or you and two people, every time you bring in somebody and you're offering them a piece of the action, you're going to actually cut down that pie. So you need to be careful about how many people you're sending into your business environment. So first, think about how big is the pie, how much is that pie actually worth? And sometimes we have an overinflated opinion about where our business is, and that's where getting external mentors to help you with evaluating what your business is worth, or the potential of that. Tamara, okay, there we go. We're all good, Tamara? Good. And then the last question here is, are they a unicorn? And I put this here because unicorns are interesting creatures. I find them to be mythical and unreal. But sometimes the concept of a unicorn is someone who has done multiple startup companies and are there to help and promote yourself through their contacts. So depending on who you're bringing in as a partner, you may have to carve out the pie a little bit more. Now, if you plan to sell, what exactly are you selling, and what exactly is the buyer buying? So is the buyer buying you, the startup founder? Are they buying your partners? Are they buying the assets that you've acquired? And those assets could be potential business arrangements with other companies, your books, your sales receipts. Could it be the team that you've built together? So you need to get an understanding as your exit strategy. Maybe a potential buyer isn't looking to buy you as the owner. Maybe the buyer is looking to buy the company as opposed to yourself. And what does that mean for you? And there's been plenty of people who have exited their original companies not to have any other additional support or involvement within the company itself, and have been paid out very, very nicely. The next one is, what if your business fails and you owe some debt? So how do you deal with that debt? Who do you owe? Do you declare bankruptcy? Do you try to pay off your debt? So there's all of these things that you need to understand about delivering on your business responsibilities, or viewing them as a loss during your business process. So as I said, when you first create a business and you're generating a little bit of income, the first thing you really need to think about is, what's your exit strategy? Where are you going to go if someone wants to buy it out, whether or not you want to sell it to somebody, or if, God forbid, you're going to close. So if any of those things happen, you're really going to need legal help. And I can't stress this enough. Having a great lawyer on your side is really, really important. I forgot to put on a slide for the Ryerson's Legal Innovation Zone, but I'll tweet that out later, but they're a great resource to also go and check out to see if you can find a lawyer, an upcoming lawyer specifically in the startup field, who will help with some pro bono work at the beginning. A couple of places for you to also look is probonoontario.org. They've got some great information there. If you're not from Ontario, some of the people who have joined, feel free to do a Google search for anybody, any organization, legal organization within your area that manages that type of service. One of the things I'll probably promote really quickly is a company that actually started up in the Legal Innovation Zone at Ryerson. It's called Clausehound. And that company actually provides template clauses, anything from NDAs to business agreements to partnership agreements and so forth. And these are excellent resources for you to do the legwork in order to get things prepared before you take it to the lawyer. Because obviously, if you're going to do a little bit of legwork and work, that's less time that the lawyer has to spend on it. All they're doing is looking at the documents that you prepared. So I think what I would want to sort of recommend again is that when you're bootstrapping, you want to do as much as possible in order to get your get as much done, so you're handing it off to the expensive services, but not as much. Not as much. Gee, I'm still getting used to this whole process. So lesson number 2. Before I go on, does anybody have any questions first about in terms of your exit strategy? Okay. If not, just let me know and send a note or just pipe in. Okay. So lesson number 2 is incorporation. And, I'm sure everybody's talked about this or you've heard about it previously. I'm talking about it from someone who's gone from a non-incorporated entity, a freelancer, if you will, someone who's specialized over the years in being a fixer prior to being incorporated. And then I found that also we need to be able to protect ourselves individually. And this is why incorporation is really important. So as a sole proprietor, as an incorporated sole proprietor, your personal assets are protected. That means that your house, your car, if you're an animator or a director or anybody in the television or film business, your camera assets, your very expensive home computer setups, all of those are protected in case there is a failure to deliver in the product and your clients decide to sue. It also helps to reduce expenses, because the expenses, the things that I just mentioned, camera equipment, computers, and so forth, those are all expenses that can be applied to your taxes when you're doing your corporate taxes, and even as a freelancer, as your personal taxes as well. And I'll talk about that in a sec. Unfortunately, it's both good and bad. You need to pay corporate tax, but for small businesses, corporate tax is around 16% here in Ontario and Canada. So it's fairly minimal compared to, say, 40% if you're working as a freelancer, or just trying to do a business with money coming in, as opposed to through an incorporated entity. Here in Canada and Ontario, you have to collect this thing called the HST, which is the Harmonization Service Tax. It's an important thing to provide. If you, I would highly recommend that you go to the CRA. The great thing about the HST, though, is that as an incorporated entity, you're paying HST and you're collecting HST. So what you pay out and what you bring in is null and void. So you're only actually giving the government the leftovers. And I always find that that's a great incentive. So it's kind of from a corporation perspective, a nil tax. One of the other issues is that you have to file yearly, and you can choose your year end. My year end actually is March 31st. So I'm in the process right now of getting my receipts together and making sure that all of my income and expenses are properly represented. Now, going on to the next bit, what I was talking to you about was a sole proprietor, and that is a single individual within the company, mainly yourself. Now, if you have if you have two or more employees, you're actually working as a corporation. It's you have all the benefits of a sole proprietor incorporation as well. But in addition to being a corporation, i.e. more than one person in the company, you're able to obtain research and development tax credits, production tax credits if you're in the film and television business, and various grants. So if you're looking to employ other people within the industry or within your business, you'll be able to pick up those grants. And one of the latest grants I've just learned is the Canadian Ontario Job Creation Grant, and they provide up to $10,000 to $15,000, up to $15,000 for small companies like yourself, under 50 employees, in order for you to train employees on your best practices, the processes, and so forth. So it's basically a workshopping grant or an extra training grant. A good place to go in terms of trying to start up your company from an incorporation perspective is Founded. And Founded provides what I would consider to be a really cheap service to get you incorporated in Canada and here in Ontario. They'll do all the legwork for you, or they'll help you do the legwork themselves. So it's really important to kind of make sure that you're trying to find the fastest route possible. I know sometimes being a bootstrapper, you don't want to give up $300 or $400 to get this done. When I incorporated back in 2005, it cost me $1,500 to do so, and I used a lawyer. It's gone down considerably, but a company like Founded really helps to get that going fast. Another place which is both helpful and very difficult to read sometimes is the Government of Canada website. Here's the current URL to help you find out all the information on how to incorporate. My advice, quite frankly, is to use Founded, or to find a lawyer to help you out. Now, if you're a freelancer, you can still, you can still have clients, you can get cash coming in and so forth. However, if you're making over $30,000, you do need to collect HST, which is 13%. So my advice to you as a freelancer, and you're still trying to figure out how to start up your company, is to collect HST right from the start. And it's as I said, a through flow tax, and it's separate from your personal taxes. So you collect the HST, you send it off to CRA, and if you are also having expenses such as buying your computer or buying a vehicle in order to do what you have to do, then you can get some of that HST back. In this particular instance, if, for instance, your expenses are $100,000 and you made only $80,000, you obviously pay no tax. And that's where good business and accounting processes go. However, also as a freelancer, you don't get access to business grants. So that's one thing to kind of consider. Now, moving on to lesson number 3. This one always confuses everybody. Burn rate and runway. Now, the burn rate is slightly different than a budget. And I would highly recommend, even if you're thinking about starting doing a startup company, to lay out a budget, find out how much money you're making, how much money it will be coming in, even if you're doing a part-time job or full-time job other than your startup business. And you'll want to do a budget on what you think it will cost for you to start up that business. Now, one of the things in terms of a burn rate, however, and this is what I do with a lot of students, I would normally do this interactively with you guys in the classroom or in the workshop area. I'd normally get you to write down every penny you spent today. And now, obviously, some of us are self-isolating, so that means hopefully we didn't spend a lot of money unless you're on Amazon or buying up Netflix accounts or Disney accounts and so forth, which you did spend some cash. But in general, a burn rate is what you spend on a daily basis. So it's really important in the sense that it's different. A burn rate is different than the budget that you've created. The budget is just your rough back of a cocktail napkin idea of the cost, whereas a burn rate is really recording all the costs that you're spending on a day-to-day basis. Now, why that's important is because you've got a runway, and the runway is the amount of cash that you have on hand in order to see your bootstrapping business become successful. And what happens very quickly is that we as startup companies, we get really excited about getting out there and getting the word out. In my particular case, I was in the film and television business, so I would spend money to go to Cannes, France, to go to the sales markets to try to sell some of the projects that I was representing or developing on my own, or to pick up new work. And to go to Cannes, France for MIPCOM or MIPTV, that would cost about $5,000. So you want to make sure that if you've only put in, if your runway is $25,000 and you're already spending 1/5 of that within a year on one major event, that it's going to pay off. So your burn rate is really making sure that you're not going over on your runway. And your runway could be anything from the money that you have in the bank that you've allocated specifically for your startup. It could be money that you're borrowing from friends and family or from investors. But it's very important to make sure that you've got a handle on where your spending is. Now, this is where accounting comes in. And I've always said that anytime you go into business, you got to have...
Sorry,
Yep.
Can you explain the runway portion again? You were cutting out while explaining that.
Yep, not a problem. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. So a runway portion, again, is all of the money that you think that you have in order to get your startup going. So if you are, for instance, working full-time and at another job, and you're putting away part of your paycheck to go towards your startup, you'll start developing a long, or hopefully a larger runway, i.e. the amount of time that you have available for you to complete your project until someone starts giving you money or giving you business contracts and so forth. My advice, and we'll talk about this very shortly, my advice is that you separate your personal money from the money that you're going to invest in yourself. So don't invest all your money into your startup company right away. Make an agreement with yourself and your family that you're going to have 25% or 30% of the money that you've saved that will go towards your project. Let me just switch over. Okay, good. Making sure that everybody's got, we're doing fine here. So whenever you start a company, you want to have two sort of services you're going after. One is legal services and the other one is accounting. It never hurts to find an amazing accountant. Now, depending on the business that you're in, you'll want to find the accountant that specifically handles that type of business. So again, I was in film and television for 25 years. So my accountant was an entertainment accountant. He understood production tax credits. He understood international co-productions. So I didn't have to explain that. Typically, when people start up a business, they go to their personal accountant, someone that's doing the personal taxes. And if they do business accounting, that's great. But if they don't, I would highly recommend not using a personal accountant. A good place to check to see if where you can find accountants is the CPA of Canada, the Chartered Professional Accountants. And if you're not Canadian in this group, again, I would look for services very similar to the CPA in your jurisdiction. So this actually is the big question. And it relates to accounting. And it's what can you write off? And as a company starting up, there's sort of pre-incorporation expenses and then there's post-incorporation expenses. As you're developing your idea, you are allowed to collect expenses that are associated with that idea. So for instance, if you are paying a lawyer or an accountant to start doing some pre-development work on your company, those are allowable expenses that you can write off. Once you're incorporated, you do have other expenses that are fully allowable as well. Some of the most popular ones are entertainment. Here in Canada, the CRA's definition of entertainment is food and drink. And they caught on to this very quickly years ago. And for entertainment expenses, you can only write off 50% of that. And when you are, for any expense that you're writing off, for anything that you want to spend on your business, you first have to have a receipt. And then you also have to have on the back of that receipt why and who you met with in order for that expense to be eligible. So this is very important because when you get audited, you want to make sure that you have that that information readily available for the CRA or the IRA to be able to qualify that. So in terms of entertainment expenses, if you're taking your accountant out for lunch or your clients out for lunch and it costs $100, you'll be able to write off 50% of that, or $50 here in Canada. However, If you're traveling and you are, oh, so Alex is asking, what do you mean the name of the person you're meeting with? So on the back of the receipt, you will always want to write down the person in the company that you're meeting as you're doing the entertainment component. So you could be taking somebody out for drinks. You could take them out for lunch or for dinner. You're wining and dining them. But on the back of the receipt, you want to say, for X project, I met with John Doe. I hope that helps. And if you're buying a laptop computer, or if you are any sort of big purchase, you want to be able to substantiate what you can, why you're buying that device, and so forth. I'm just going to give you a little bit of warning with regards to cars or automobiles or trucks. This is kind of a red ticket item for auditing. Most auditors will look at 100% car write-off as being ineligible. So if you're going to, so for instance, if you're a delivery driver and you bought a car, you will need to keep a record of every delivery that you've made, and the time you started the delivery, the time you ended the delivery, how much kilometers, and so forth. That's a lot of work. So what I've done, and you will need to qualify this with your own accountant, is that I've used the 20% rule. So if I'm using my vehicle 20% of the time throughout the year to do business, I only write off 20% of the vehicle expenses. And that could be everything from gas to car washes to the lease payments and so forth. And that tends to be a reasonable amount of money. I would also look at whether or not you're working from home. A lot of us do. As if you've got my video on, you'll see the back of my my house. Oddly enough, back in 2004, this is actually where I started when I started up my incorporation, and within about 6 months, we grew so fast we had to build a new studio, and we moved out of my living room. And so again, the rule of thumb here is that if you are going to write off your home office, you should have a room that has a door that closes. You need to be able to demonstrate that that room is not a bedroom, that it actually has a computer and a desk in it, and a separate telephone line. Nowadays, we can just do a separate cell phone. And all of that information also needs to be provided to the CRA or the RA, the Internal Revenue Agency, if requested. So where's the grand, my son seems to be, okay, good. Yep. Sorry about that. I saw my son sneaking around. He's a little shit sometimes, but hey, I love him. Okay, so we were talking about writing off travel expenses previously. So in the country and in the city of your origin, for instance. So I work here in Toronto. If I'm doing enter, yes, I'll tell them to come by and say hi after. If you're here working in Toronto, and you're doing a business expense such as entertainment, I can only write off 50%. However, if I have to drive to London, Ontario, which I've done on several occasions, or I have to fly to Vancouver, the moment you go onto an airplane, you're now in a 100% write-off environment. So all the food that you're spending to feed yourself while you're on a business trip, all the taxis you're taking, the airplane you're taking, the hotels you're staying at, and so forth, those are all 100% tax deductible. Now, I also have to warn you a little bit because sometimes people like to combine their vacation with their business. And all I would say to you is this, is that if you're going to combine the two, make sure you clearly identify on your receipts and on your tickets which days were which. So you should have a calendar. If you're going to, say, New Zealand, like I did last year, I went to New Zealand. I went to visit Weta Studios. I went to visit several producers. And of course, I went on a vacation with my wife after I did my business. So everything that was done prior to the vacation part, and specifically for myself, not my wife, is 100% a write-off. Once you turn into vacation mode, you have to, then nothing can be written off from that perspective. I hope that answers that question for you guys. Now, a good place to look again is the Government of Canada Revenue Agency. This is actually quite an effective place to find information on what can be written off and what can't. Usually if we're together, I give you a little bit more tips and tricks. But in this particular case, one of the things my accountant always says to me is that hogs go to slaughter and pigs get fed. So I never quite understood that, but I think basically what it was saying is don't be a hog while you're trying to find what can be written off and what can't, and try to be as upfront and transparent with what your business expenses are. 100% of your, there was a question about how much you can actually write off. You can write off everything on everything that's reasonable under the Government of Canada guidelines. And if your expenses exceed how much money you're bringing in, as an incorporation, you can carry that over to the next year. So again, I'll use $100,000. If your expenses were $100,000, but you only made $80,000, that means you have a $20,000 carryover that you can take over to the next year. So in the following year, let's say that your expenses are $60,000, but you made $80,000. In this case, you have a $20,000 carryover. So $20,000 plus the $60,000 of expenses is $80,000. That means that you don't have to pay any corporate taxes. Okay. So when I'm talking about what can be written off and what can't, we have to keep in mind that we're talking about corporate taxes in this particular case, as opposed to personal taxes. Okay. So I'm moving on to the next frame, and this is bookkeeping. And I can't tell you how important this is. There's a lot of apps out there that track your expenses. It will keep track of where things are. The first question I would be asking you, because in my other role at the university, I talk about privacy and security, and in particular, who stores what data. And if you're using an app that's maybe produced by somebody in the United States, where is your personal data being stored? Is it being stored in a server in Virginia or in Malaysia or in China? And so subsequently, if you're uploading all of your expenses and your bookkeeping, then you may not have full security in case the company that you're dealing with has their servers breached. So just kind of keep in mind that if you're using these freeware software applications or apps, you need to find out from them where they're storing your personal information. Now, one of the best, and I'm not sort of oh yes, and wave accounting. Yes, I agree with that way. Sorry, Nick was telling me about wave accounting, and that's true. I should have put that up with Intuit as well. Intuit and Wave are Canadian companies, which means that they are responsible for keeping your personal data within Ontario. So if you sign up as an Ontarian or a Canadian, they have to keep your data within Canada, and that's by law. So they've got secure server systems and so forth. So there is some comfort that the information that you're sending up to the cloud is actually secure. QuickBooks is really good. It's simple. The CRA recognizes it as a tool that everybody responds to effectively. Shelby has indicated the Mozilla Monitor or something similar. They track your breaches. Oh, sorry. I totally got that wrong, Shelby. So if you are using Mozilla, you can monitor whether or not your data assets are being breached. So anyways, with regards to QuickBooks, I find it's a great environment to use. I'm not advocating for you to go out and buy it, but find something similar that is recognized by the Canadian Revenue Agency and is simple to use. Oddly enough, I'm old school, so I put all of my receipts in a shoebox, and then I pay my 14-year-old $10 an hour every year to sort it. So you find what works best for you, but because I like to keep my stuff paper related, it's really important. And speaking of paper, I want to say that from an incorporation perspective, if you incorporate, you need to keep all paper receipts for 7 years, which means that the CRA can come back, the revenue agency can come back to you at any time to do a re-audit of any of your 7 years worth of books. So as you are scanning your receipts and thinking that they're stored in the cloud, just keep in mind that you need to have paper receipts in order for any revenue agency to accept that as legitimate. Okay? We're going to move on. Any other questions with regards to legal or accounting? Would it be okay if the receipt was never received in paper? That's a good question. My quick answer to you is always print out electronic receipts and put them in your file system, and obviously put your paper files into a secure space. If it's in the basement, make sure it's in a waterproof container. I use Iron Mountain. They come and pick up the receipts pick up all my papers every year, and they store them. They're insured, they're licensed, and so forth. So always try to have a paper receipt just in case your digital assets get lost. Okay? Lesson number 4. This is the money bit of it. And the money bit is, it really kind of scares people sometimes. So I want you to, I don't want you to be scared, but I also want you to keep an open mind. So the first thing is cash flow is king. And I can't express that enough, is that when you're right on to into the business of whatever you're doing, make sure you got money coming in right away. Okay, even if it's a trickle of money, it means that it demonstrates that you've got a sound business, that you've got receipts coming in, and making sure from a revenue agency perspective that you're not just collecting receipts in order to pay off personal expenses. The other thing with regards to cash flow is that you want to make sure that your rapid sales and short payment cycle are there. So there's a policy for most large corporations to pay you in 120 or 90 days. you'll want to be able to negotiate a 30-day turnaround as best you can. And you may want to say to them with a contract, for instance, that 30% upfront or 50% upfront and 50% in 120 days. So try to find a middle ground to allow both your needs and their needs to be helped. Reoccurring revenue is a big thing. That's making sure that you have the same client on a regular basis. So if you've got a good relationship with somebody and you're doing well, you want to make sure that that money is continually coming through. And you may have to pull a couple of favors. You may have to do a little extra, but reoccurring revenue, no matter how much it is great on the books, and it looks like your business has some legs. Passive revenue is what my colleague Dr. Sean Weiss likes to say as being the money generator. And Sean's written several books, which he's put up on Amazon. After he's written the book, it's up on Amazon, and he doesn't have to do anything about it because Amazon is supplying the book. People like yourself will go on Amazon, buy it, and he doesn't have to do any work. So you want to be able to find your service or your product in that constantly has a subscription cycle or a cycle that is passive in nature, one that is constantly generating money on a regular basis. This is my favorite word, capital efficient. I cannot express this enough. When a startup company starts getting into business, they sometimes think that in order to be successful, you have to look successful. So you got to buy that ping pong table or have that espresso machine or spend a lot of money on very expensive rent. Don't do any of that. If your money is not if the money that you're spending does not actually generate more money, then it's not being capital efficient. So try to avoid any of the big ticket fancy stuff for a while. And then once you have got good revenue coming in and you can spend money on the extras like an espresso machine or a ping pong table for your staff, then do so. Let's talk about borrowing money from friends and family. As nice as they may seem, at the end of the day, borrowing money from your parents or your siblings or your nieces or nephews and so forth, that becomes really complicated because they're people you love, they're people you have an intimate relationship with, and sometimes money and family don't mix. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of amazing family businesses out there that do their own lending and borrowing in between family members. And if you've got that relationship, go right ahead. But in my particular case as a startup, I've always found that sometimes if you ask family or friends for money, you don't know when they're going to need it. So there's unpredictable repayment requests. Sometimes they want to get into your business. They want to actually be on the board and so forth. So try to avoid that as best as possible. Banks, unsecured loans and have high interest rates. Just a side note, we're probably about 15 slides away from the end, but I'm going to save the best stories for the end. So if you want to hang in there for a little bit, we're almost there. With regards to banks, you're an unsecured loan. If you've bought equipment for a particular studio or if you own a car, they don't care. That's an unsecured loan position. They're going to say, do you own a house? Do you own do you have anything that is of a substantial value. So because even if you own a house and you get a loan on your house, you're still going to have a high interest rate on that. And generally it's prime plus about 5 or 7%. Or if you go to the Business Development Bank of Canada, it'll have different obligations in there as well. My advice, quite frankly, is to stay away from bank loans as much as you can, but it doesn't hurt to have a line of credit for any emergencies. So just keep that in mind. Shelby has asked a question with regards to corporations. Is there a difference between loans from people in your network and investors? Yes, there is quite a big difference. Investors will have a different terms of agreement and different positions within your company. Let me just flip to that loan for, so seed money or investor venture money, they're basically looking for a position in your company. They're investing a large amount of cash or potential large amount of cash in order to potentially get you over the hump and make whatever product or service you've got successful in order for them to get a large return on investment. They are looking for near-term results. So they're generally looking for a 25% return on investment on a year-to-year basis until you can pay them off entirely. And they may want a position in your company. So i.e., they may want some ownership. Whereas loans from people in your networks, they probably will be looking for a return on investment, but not necessarily at the 25%. And that can be negotiated much more effectively than it can be, say, with a venture capital group. Bootstrapping generally does not include venture capital money, and I've traditionally steered away from it. I've been in the business 25 years. I've been an incorporated entity with 200 to 300 people as employees from large-scale animation and visual effects production companies and so forth. And all of those times that I was in that situation, we never went to the bank or to an individual money. And it was basically because, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a story here. My father was a firefighter. And as most firefighters back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, they also had second jobs because firefighting didn't pay a lot of money. And they, once they did their 12 days on, 12 days off type of thing, they had some extra time. My dad really liked to fish. So he was a sports fisherman, and he would get a canoe or get a boat and get a fishing rod and go out and fish. And that was his thing. So from a sort of a hobby perspective, he decided that his hobby was going to be his business. And his business went on pretty good for quite a number of years. We went from a very small store to a very large store. He opened up a store right across from Labatt's Brewery in London, Ontario. I worked there as a kid from age 10 all the way to 21. But during this time of rapid growth, we had a couple of big major problems. One was Walmart. They showed up in all the small towns and started offering the same goods that we sold to people, and at a cheaper rate. And then the road in between the beer store and the fishing store got torn up for a year and a half. So in that particular time period, my father had to declare bankruptcy. And there was this notion of he owed the bank, he owed his personal investors, he owed his family investors and so forth. And my dad, being the type of guy he was, after he declared bankruptcy, he could have walked away and not owed anybody a single penny. But for the next 10 years, still being a firefighter, he put his own personal money into an account in order to pay off those debts. This is kind of a long story to tell you that when I became a studio owner or a small business owner or startup entrepreneur, I decided I was never going to borrow money from anybody to make sure that I could always pay off my debts. So I guess what I would probably say to you from a personal perspective is try to keep your personal money and your family, or your personal money and your business money separate. Try to keep your family money away from your business money if you don't have a strong relationship with your family. And always save a little bit of cash for these rainy days. Especially today's a great example because obviously we're all self-isolating and some of our personal businesses are suffering. So we need to at least make sure that all of our bills are paid. Now, the last thing, and if anybody knows who I am, my office sits in the digital media zone at Ryerson. I was lucky enough 9 years ago to be brought into Ryerson to help develop the concept of zone learning and the Masters in Digital Media program. And as part of that, we embedded the Masters in Digital Media program in the DMZ. And in the DMZ, I was a dragon for quite a number of years as we started to evaluate companies as they were coming through. And there was a lot of companies, startup companies, that would give us these business income statements or projections, and they would have these massive payouts for their founders. So if, for instance, and I'm just throwing this out there, if a founder is asking for $500,000 in investment money, but the founder wants to pay themselves $100,000 and their co-founder is another $100,000, and everybody else is supposed to survive on, or your business is supposed to survive on $300,000, that's a massive red flag for anybody investing. I always find that if you pay yourself last, you will be rewarded in much greater capacity later on. So pay your employees, pay the people who your suppliers. If you've got to pay the bank, pay them, and then pay yourself. That way you still retain a lot of ownership in your company, and it also gives you an opportunity to demonstrate to any potential buyers that you've got the ability and the fiscal responsibility to manage even a larger business when you move forward, when you expand. Now, lesson number 5. I'm going to move forward. If anybody's got any questions, just let me know. I'm going to flip through this very quickly because I just want to remind people about minimal viable products. You want to put your best foot forward on an MVP, and it's really important. I know there's this culture, the startup culture of getting it out fast and being agile and responsive and so forth. But I got to tell you, sometimes people don't want a crappy piece of thing that they're going to pay for, and then they don't want to wait for you. They don't want to wait for you to fix that thing. So if you're going to sell bikes, don't give your potential buyers anything less than what they're asking for. And you want to give them as all the functionality that is important for them, your buyers, to do whatever they need to do. Okay. So deliver on quality as opposed to got to shove as many features as possible into your product. And if your product only does one thing, but it does it really well, that's a lot better than giving us a product that does 100 things that don't go very well. And I have to say, Microsoft Word was a lot like that back in the mid 90s and the early 2000s. And there's, Adobe Photoshop, a great tool set, but my God, there's just a ton of stuff in there that sometimes we don't need everything of. So I would rather have a functioning piece of software or functioning product than something that has all these potential functions that don't work. The other thing is, get out of your business, or get out of your, sorry, I didn't mean get out of your business, get out of your office and find out really what everybody's looking for. So if the market is telling you that they want a wagon instead of a bike, build them a wagon. We have a saying, don't drink your own Kool-Aid. And I think this fits here, is that sometimes we get it in ourselves, we get excited about delivering on a particular product or an idea that we in our own filter bubble have been passing around amongst our friends and family for multiple months, and everybody's getting excited about it, but we haven't checked the industry or the people who might use it. So I've put this little URL here from StatsCan. The one wonderful thing about the Canadian government is they generally collect stats on everything. So if you are looking for how many female shoes, or how many women's shoe stores there are in your particular area, StatsCan has got that information. StatsCan's got the information about how many people actually buy shoes. Is it younger women? Is it older women? And so forth. So I would check with them, and then I would also check with the market through a series of Google surveys and so forth, just to make sure that you know exactly what you want to provide your clients. So lesson number 6 is the team. And the first thing, obviously, teams are really important. You want to make sure that the people that you're bringing onto the team understand your values and reflect your values. And we all have different values and processes. And it's almost impossible to find somebody who's going to be a perfect fit, but you want to find somebody who meets your particular notion of a great team player. I always want to hire for passion and commitment to your vision. If they don't have the skill sets that you need, but they're really passionate about, they're really passionate about your business, then I would go for them. By the way, Mo, I'm going to get back to you about your question about selling personal bonds or bonds for the business later on. But let me finish off this one first. So don't hire for obligation. So if there was somebody that was helping you through the tough times, helping you with images or photographs and so forth, and they're out of a job now, and you want to hire them, make sure that they've got the skill set that you want in order to get the job done. So just don't hire your brother-in-law, for instance, because he needs a job. Make sure you hire that person because they've got the skill and the commitment and the vision that you need in order to get the job done. These are sort of the top 3 things that you want to be looking for. And I'm going to say the last bit here is an HR specialist. If you don't have any HR skill sets, there's plenty of HR specialists out there that can be brought on part-time in order to help you gear up your crew, make sure you're following all the rules and regulations from the Canadian and Ontario perspective. And there are a lot of rules to follow now. But let's first talk about sort of the 3 main areas. You want to find someone who's a doer, and that's an operational person, someone who understands what TMI means in the real estate business, what a lease means, how to find the right space for your business, who to find in terms of an HR specialist, whether they know how to pay the hydro bills and pay the electrical bills. In my particular case, I built studios, animation studios. So I needed to find an operations person that understand electrical loads, because if you got 200 people and the computers that they're using are more than 15 amps, you can't just plug those computers into a regular outlet. So you need to find someone who is operationally smart. Next person is a technical specialist. That is really someone who knows the nuts and bolts of the technical capabilities of your product or service. And they're also probably going to be somebody who is going to give you the backbone in order to get if you're running a digital situation, your digital background running, or if you're a maker, such as a furniture maker or someone in a woodworking shop, knows how to actually operate the systems. So find a technical individual. Then you want to get sales going. I always like to say that sometimes as a founder, you're going to be doing a little bit of everything. As a founder, you're going to be the best salesperson. So don't put the operations person out there, or don't put the technical person out there to be your salesperson. It's got to be you. And if you're not sort of an individual that likes to be in front of people and so forth, and you need to have that front end individual, that salesperson, I'd highly recommend looking at maybe bringing on a partner that brings those skills and capabilities to your talent triangle. So basically what I've discussed here is a talent triangle. And once again, bringing on that HR specialist is really important, because here in Ontario, we have to follow everything from accessibility to harassment in the workplace to benefits versus non-benefit systems. So there's a whole slew of information, which I'm going to, in a completely different presentation, I could go through to talk about what is required for you to get the job done. If you hire one individual here in Ontario or in Canada, you have to follow all of the rules that are set out by the Ontario government and the Canadian government. So just keep that in mind, please. The other thing to help you out, and I really love this tool, it's called Talent Today. Generally, I make all of my students go through it. It's a fairly easy employee personality tool. It kind of gives you the sense of where each of your employees sit. And I find it really good because it compares people. So your salespeople, quite frankly, generally sit in the red area. They tend to be outgoing. They tend to want to go to the exciting components. Your operational people tend to be more organizationally aware. Your founders tend to be more in this area, being able to persuade people to do or to lend money. This area here, the purple and the green, is really important, because these are the people that become the heart of your company. They're the ones who are making sure that everybody's concerns and needs are met, that they're understanding what is going on, especially now, for instance, in this COVID-19 environment, we're running into a lot of very emotional times, and these people are best served. So you want to make sure that your company or your startup has a good mixture of individuals available to you. And it's important to recognize that you yourself can be both this red color, independent and self-confident, but you can also have someone's needs and fears in the back of your head as well. Now, lesson number 7, and just before I move on, Mo, in terms of selling personal bonds or bonds for their businesses, there's no, I think there would likely be a service out there. I would highly recommend you not go towards that process. I'd try to stay away from it, to be honest with you, because it only complicates your startup environment. And it's something that would require a lot more legal requirements. So, obviously lawyers are about $350 an hour. So you may want to avoid anything that costs you that type of coinage at the beginning. Startup insurance. This is something that nobody thinks about. And when I talk about startup insurance, I'm talking about the types of insurance that you need both to run your company as well as to ensure that the people that you've employed are properly insured as well. True Shield Insurance is, again, a Canadian company. There are other insurance companies around the world that deal with startup insurance. And oddly enough, 9 years ago, when we started this startup school and developing this process, there was hardly any insurance companies that would recognize startup or entrepreneurial environments. This company and others have given us an opportunity to buy reasonable insurance at a lower rate and to be able to be flexible enough with our insurance. In terms of both lawyers and insurance companies, you'll want to find reputable firms, reputable lawyers, and those can be startup lawyers. I've found actually a lot of lawyers through personal connections and through the Legal Innovation Zone at Ryerson that worked elsewhere and then decided, I'm gonna try the startup business. And they bring years of experience with them, but they understand that startup companies don't have a lot of money. And so they're willing to do a little pro bono work at the beginning. And then as things progress, hopefully they've done a great job for you. So in return, what you're doing is you're sending them more business. I can't stress it enough that you need insurance if you're an incorporated entity, both to insure you against stuff like what's going on today, COVID-19, or if you're employing an employee that has an accident on the job or has an accident while they're working with a client, you need to make sure that you have that insurance available. Lesson number 8 is physical space. And the interesting, and I've just thrown up some examples here. Obviously, I've got the DMZ in there and Ryerson Futures. There's a lot of differences between the environments that you can go. One is co-sharing, and co-sharing has really sort of taken off. There's WeWork and other places. I've just thrown Acme Works up there, which is a local co-sharing environment. This is a fee-based environment that allows you to pay on a daily basis for access to their co-sharing environment, for you to take meetings, for you to meet up with other people. You can pay a larger fee. I think Acme Works is now about $450 a month for a desk space in a open co-sharing environment, or more money for a private space. The one, if you go to an incubator like the DMZ or other incubators, they sometimes provide space for free for a short period of time, and then they ask you to pay for a desk fee, which is generally about $350 to $450 per person per month. Next, so let me talk about these two first. $450 bucks per month per desk may sound like a lot, but if they're providing insurance for the use of their space, if they've got internet that you're using, if they are paying for the heat and the hydro, maybe they've got food that they bring in in order to give to clients and give to people who are incubating, that's all money in the bank for you. So in the long run, it might be worthwhile to go to a co-sharing or an incubator-like environment. An accelerator is slightly different, and that is where your business has done quite well for a while. It has shown some legs, and subsequently, the accelerator is willing to invest their money into your business. But keep in mind, if they're investing their money into your business, that means that they may own a portion of your business at the end of the day. So just kind of keep in mind where the value is for each of these options. And obviously, as you become more successful and you start to develop your own business, and you need a place that you can hang your sign on, you'll want to make sure that you're going to a lease environment that has some favorable lease agreements, that in case of something like COVID-19, if they're shutting the place down, shutting the building down, that there's a force majeure, and I'll talk about that in a sec, clause in there where maybe you have reduced rent, or you don't have to pay rent for the time that the building is shut down. So these are all things that you need to keep in mind. And subsequently, again, you need to have a good lawyer to take a look at those agreements.
Sorry, the difference between co-sharing, incubator, and accelerator, I didn't quite get that. It seems like the accelerator, basically because they invest in you, would they provide you a space to work that would be kind of like a co-sharing program?
Yeah, that's right. So basically what they're doing in an accelerator situation, they're basically giving you the space and their time for free, their mentorship for free, in exchange for money that they would provide you in order to invest in your company as a venture capital investment, which may or may not have part ownership in your company. Some accelerators have ownership requirements of around 5% to about 25%. So in that particular case, you're always looking for what their terms of requirement are. But in terms of us as startup companies, we're looking for a co-sharing environment. Well, first off, we're probably working out of our home as a home company. Then we're going to a co-sharing environment if, like you, I've got a couple of crazy kids down in the basement using up your internet and eating your food while you're trying to speak to your clients, or an incubator where it gives you a place to actually meet with clients. So instead of meeting them at a Starbucks or coffee shop or whatever, it kind of gives you a front end look of more professionalism. I hope I answered that question. My best offer.
Sorry, I think that was my fault. I don't know if I was very clear asking. So with co-sharing, it's more you're just renting a space to actually work. With incubator, you'd be renting a space to work, but you can also bring clients in. An accelerator, you would get access to a space because they're investing, but you're giving up part ownership in your company. Yeah. And you're also getting kind of like feedback and resources from them. Did I get that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Actually, one of the things I might want to mention is that in all three of these sort of setups, you would likely have a mentor.
Oh, you entirely cut out there. No, I've lost you altogether.
Hang on, everybody. I'm just trying to get him back in here. I don't know what happened there. We can't hear you, Michael. I don't know what's happening.
There we go. Okay, I think we got it now. You guys can hear me, right? Okay, good.
Yep.
So in all three, wow, we've just learned something new. So in all three examples, there should be some form of mentorship available to you. Generally in the incubator and accelerator side, it tends to be free mentorship, i.e. the incubator or the accelerator have got mentors coming in and donating their time. In the co-sharing, there might be mentors who are on a fee-based perspective. But in all three examples, or at least in the first two examples, you're going to pay a fee of some sort to the companies that you're providing this or getting the space provided to you. In the accelerator, they tend to give it to you free because they're not going to charge, they're not going to give you money in order for you to spend that money on them to give you space. I hope that I answered that question.
Okay. Yeah, that was great. Thank you very much.
Yep, my pleasure. So the next part is lesson number 9. And I threw this in today, force majeure. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of this. This is a legal term. And this is primarily written within your business agreements or in your corporate agreements, or it could be in your lease agreements with your suppliers. And that's basically the agreement between yourself and the person you've got a business agreement on how they will not pay you or partially pay you or partially wait to pay you in case of a major catastrophe. And in our particular case, force majeure today is COVID-19. There's a lot of people that are now suppliers that can't make deliveries. There's a lot of people such as yourself not being able to deliver to your clients. So what is the requirements for people to pay you and not pay you? And again, this is where a lawyer is really, really important for you to get, because they're going to dictate those terms. Now, obviously, if you're working, if your client is a major Fortune 500 company, their force majeure is going to be in their favor, not yours. And at that point, you're going to have to make a decision on whether or not you want to take those contracts or fulfill those agreements. Nobody would have figured that 80% of the world would have shut down because of COVID-19. And I would suspect over the next few months, we're going to see a lot of issues with regards to force majeure. So just keep an eye on it as we move forward, as you start developing your business plans, as you're starting to sign agreements and lease agreements, always ask for it. Lesson number 10, and this is sort of, this is really the end of my business lecture and the start of my sort of giving you some personal stories. You know, this is your baby. You own it. You started it. You really are the person that drives it. You're the salesperson. You're the jack of all trades to get this thing off the ground. My personal success has been to limit my personal money with my business money. So when I retired in 2010, I retired quite successfully. The people that worked for me, most of them were given machines, were given good packages. Some of them we found great jobs for them to go to. So when I retired, unlike my father, when I told you about the story about being in debt, I was able to be not in debt. and that's a great sort of sense of accomplishment, is being able to have a wonderful staff and crew and be able to work many years on in our particular case, we produced 500 hours of children's television programming. So it's your baby. You really need to care and take care of it as best you can, and make the tough decisions when you have to make them. Now, this is kind of the end of my my lecture, but I also have a few stories and some additional resources for you to think about first. If you're here in Toronto, Startup Here Toronto is a great place to check out. They've got lots of resources, lots of free online tutorials, such as the one I'm giving right now. So really take a look at what's available to you in the in your area, whatever that may be. Now, before I start on any personal case stories or case studies, I've got 3 or 4 that I want to throw out to you. Does anybody have any questions so far? You can either text me or chat in or chime in. Nope. Okay, that's good. So let me give you a couple of things. So herding cats is a big thing in the television business. We always talk about herding cats because, like any cat out there, I've got to tell you, it's almost impossible to get people to follow a particular direction at any one point. And by the way, the questions that are coming through on prepaid lawyers or insurance or how do you handle cash, I'll answer those towards the end, okay? Sorry, Mo, I think I said that once before, but I'll do it again. So anyways, keep in mind that your company, you're a cat herder. And as a television producer, I did a lot of cat herding myself. So I've been in this business a while, and I've run across a lot of things. So in 2001, obviously, it was 9/11, and 9/11 occurred at between 8:45 in the morning and about 9:10 in the morning. I was just coming into the production studio at that time. Sorry, I'm just going to switch this just in case. You know, it's an unsettling scene, so I just want to get rid of it. I came into the studio at that particular time. I managed the studio for a large production company here in Canada, and we had a staff of about 150 to 200 people. People were trickling in. Things were happening in real time. Our clients were in New York. And so it was really a difficult situation. So things were flowing very quickly, as they have been in the last little while. And we needed to pivot very quickly. And that means having an open mind, not showing concern or stress to the employees that you're working with, or to even to your clients, because obviously they're freaking out, you're trying not to freak out, and so forth. So I find there's this term called pivoting, and that's being able to pivot on a dime, be able to make rapid decisions with a clear head, and to be someone who's strong and supportive of the people that are around you. By 10 o'clock, I knew that there was no way that any of us would be able to work that day. So even though our burn rate at the studio was probably around $50,000 to $60,000 a day Canadian, I knew that we had to eat that money just to make sure that everybody could go home and be with their loved ones, try to find out what was happening with their friends and family in these countries and so forth. So Sometimes money doesn't matter. If you've got the opportunity to do so, release your staff in difficult times, but have a clear head and think about these, think quickly and effectively. The next one was the Toronto blackout. And I think this was in 2002, 2003. And during the Toronto blackout, it was getting close. And everybody, I'll answer your questions who are texting very shortly. And the Toronto blackout happened towards the end of the day. Again, I had about 150 people working on multiple projects, very expensive projects, and the entire power went out. And we have a saying in computer animation and visual effects, save often. And you never know when your power is going to go out. So we kind of get ourselves into this this process of always saving our files and making sure that we're able to, if the power does go out, that the file is there. Now, what didn't happen was that we didn't have any backup generators at that particular time, and our server rooms weren't able to save as quickly as possible. So because the power went out and because we didn't have any generators, we ended up spending $4 million putting in a server room at that time, and everybody wait for it, a server room that had 1 terabyte of storage. Yes, it was a massive server room that had air conditioning systems and backup systems for 1 terabyte, which we can now get on a disk drive. So making sure that you have a backup plan for everything that your businesses and so forth is really important. Now, the next, obviously, next thing is COVID-19. None of us knew that this was going to happen. We are all self-isolating, and based on a lot of the reports I'm reading, we're going to end up self-isolating for at least a couple of weeks, if not a couple of months, off and on. So you really need to kind of have a backup plan ready in case your clients need you. Make sure that you have a way for you to work at home, a way for your employees to work from home, a way for you to make your bills and your payments, or to get your employees rapidly on EI and unemployment insurance and so forth. So again, trying to think of the worst thing that could happen when things are really good in order for you to be prepared when you get there. This is a little story I have from the film and television business, and this is a great story. It's from my time when I worked in the software industry. So I worked in software creation back in the 1990s, primarily in animation and visual effects, and I demonstrated the software around the world. In doing so, I went to various animation companies, and one of those companies was DreamWorks, and they were working on a show called I forgot the name of the bloody show I was actually working on. So this is Prince of Egypt. Thank you very much. So anyways, this is the start of Parting of the Red Sea, and this is a particle system and so forth. So these guys are for the production was by DreamWorks. Now, I also worked in Japan and for a guy named Katsuro Otomo. And Katsuro Otomo is the director of Akira. He's a lovely gentleman, and he also created a movie called Steam Boy, which we helped produce some of the special effects for and so forth. And while working in Japan, our business partners, our Japanese business partners, wanted to have the people from DreamWorks come to Japan and demonstrate what they were doing using the software that we had developed. So the people at DreamWorks here wanted to meet Katsuro Otomo and Katsuro Otomo's handlers didn't want him to meet any North American production companies because he was busy working on a lot of Japanese productions. So we created an opportunity for our friends at DreamWorks to meet our friends at Katsuro Otomo's studio, Beyond Sea. And we had a private meeting at Katsuro Otomo's favorite sushi bar one night, in which a representative from DreamWorks pitched to Katsuro Otomo for him to come and become director of an ad. They wanted him to be the director of the animated version of Fahrenheit 451. I can tell you that now because, you know, it's decades now that it happened. But as the night goes on, we're drinking sake, we're eating lots of great sushi and so forth. And Katsuro Otomo says to my colleague and friend over at DreamWorks, you know, I'd like to offer you one of my favorite Japanese dishes. And here's a picture of it here. You know, and I had a Japanese handler who is also a friend of mine. And because Katsuro Otomo only spoke Japanese and we only spoke English, the handler translated. And this was late into the night, and I looked over, I did a sideways glance to my Japanese handler, and I said to him, I looked at him and I said, you know, with my eyes, should I eat this? And the handler sort of shook his head, and in Japanese, he said, oh, Michael is full, Michael-san is full, and I'm full. But my colleague from DreamWorks said, no, I'm gonna eat it no matter what. So Katsuro Otomo and my colleague from DreamWorks, they ate a couple of bowls of this, and after it was all done, my colleague from DreamWorks said, "Hey, this was great. What is this?" And Katsuro said, "This is the most expensive and the best cod sperm that we have in Japan." And the next day, my colleague had to fly back to Los Angeles to DreamWorks. And unfortunately, he puked the entire time in the airplane for all 13 hours. So as I tell you that particular story, let me move on to one with a little bit more of a reflection. And this is okay, I'm glad somebody enjoyed that. This is a command control in Unix, rm-r-f to the star. And back in 1997, we worked in a lot of command-based environments. And in fact, I animated as an animator in a command-based environment for a while. But this particular command basically means to delete everything. And at one time, I was just about to get on a plane to go to Japan, not to have cod sperm, but to meet up with my Japanese business partners, and the production that I had developed for them was actually accidentally deleted using this command. And obviously, because I'm a backup guy, I had lots in backup, lots of what I did in backup in a different spot. So I was able to quickly back it up before I got onto the plane. The one thing I found interesting was I recently read the Pixar book on creative thinking, and the same thing happened to Pixar. Someone accidentally used this command line and erased 90% of Toy Story. And I think they were able to reproduce a good 70% of it by going into people's machines and back, getting whatever they could to back up. But the important thing here is always to have some sort of backup, in order to get this work, to make sure that whatever you've done is available for you to recall later on. So what did we learn here? Before I get to answering the other questions, obviously, don't eat the cod sperm. And obviously, thank you very much. Now, Leslie, oh, it's incredible that you met the godfather of the anime. Yes, yeah, he was just a lovely guy. And to be honest with you, my colleague at DreamWorks really, you know, it was bad for him on the plane, but it turned out to be a good opportunity for us to meet probably one of the best directors in my lifetime. So let me go back to Safara for a moment. She said, sorry, I missed the part about paying yourself last. Can you explain that point again? That's really important. What I'm basically trying to get at here is that try to pay everybody else. And I know it might be rough for you. You could be eating ramen noodles and your bills might be piling up. Your personal bills may be piling up. But as long as you're paying off your clients or your suppliers, you're paying your employees and so forth, you're building a reputation of someone who is reliable and successful. Even if your company fails, but you've done everything right in order to keep it afloat. So for instance, COVID-19, there's going to be a lot of companies that fail, okay? It's really important for you to recognize that your reputation is more than your business. And subsequently, if you pay yourself last, if you demonstrate good fiscal responsibility, even though your company failed, it will set you up for a better opportunity to either build a new company or be able to be brought on as a more senior executive elsewhere. So I hope, Sephora, I answered that question. And Mo, how do you handle cash in your company, and do you invest in it or keep it in a savings account? Yeah, all the money you earn in your company as you're developing, you're getting paid, you're paying off your bills, you're paying yourself, you're paying your employees. Any money you earn goes right back into your business. It's only until you hit the 25 to 50% mark, i.e. 50% of the money that you have can actually go into long-term savings or can go into investor payback or paying yourself back. Do you actually extract any money out of the business? So until you get your sea legs, until you're actually, my goal is when I started making $1 million, that was the time, and I didn't know anybody, that was the time that we were able to invest more into development of new products and new shows into the company, being able to pay either silent investors or to invest in larger spaces and so forth, or to pay your partners, because at the end of the day, your partners are going to be looking for an investment of some sort as well. And I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions. Oh, Azita asked if I had any recommendations for a prepaid lawyer or insurance. I would go to the Legal Innovations Zone and get them to give you an idea of who's available. We'll put up on this chat before we come out, or maybe Cleo, you can put the Legal Innovation Zone website in there. Yeah, Mo, my pleasure. That'll give you an opportunity to actually go to a legal component of it. And in terms of accountants, I'd always do word of mouth, because you're probably going to be looking for someone who understands your business, but as well understands who you are. Now, let me just put this over to here. I got to find myself here. There we go. And let me just kill this. And can everybody see me? I just wanted to say goodbye, ask if there's any other questions. Okay, Azita, let me go get to you. Oh, yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You guys wanted to see the kids, so I'll call them up. Hey, Rowan and Kieran. Yeah, they wanted to see who you are. And Natty, what's your question? If you could just type that out again for me. Oh, when running a business at home, is there any way for a business address in place of home to, my best bet, my best recommendation for you is to always have a business address that you can borrow. Sorry, here are the kids, knucklehead number 1 and number 2. Yeah, come on, and Nadia, I'll get to you in a sec. You guys crouch down.
You said it was.
This is Kieran. This is Rowan, the 14-year-old. Yeah, Sephora says hi. Yeah, okay, thanks. Nadia, it's everybody says hello, by the way, boys. I would use a prepaid business address if you don't want to use your personal address. I think that's the question you're asking. It can be, I would not use a PO box though, because it gives off the wrong signal, Natty, if you're using a PO box or if you're using an address that doesn't represent where you do your business. So that's my best advice. Yeah. Is there anything else I can do? Oh, okay. My thanks. Obviously, this was brand new for us. We're working hard to try to make it work for you. I know Cleo is going to do the other session, the remaining sessions on either this platform or another platform. I would highly recommend that you continue to participate. I appreciate the time that you spent with me here. I know it's, you got lots of stuff to do on a regular basis. I'm going to take out my, it's going to take out my glasses, but I can't see. Mo asked, is legal insurance worth it? Yes, it is. I would highly recommend insurance, particularly now. If you had insurance for force majeure, you'd be able to potentially pay off your your service providers or your clients or potentially your employees. Unfortunately, I can't recommend a service provider because obviously that goes against our policy from a Ryerson perspective. And from a personal perspective, I always go with the insurance company that's closest to startup insurance as opposed to a business or personal insurance. Mo, I'm not sure. I think, let me just put you back to this company here. There's the slide deck that I gave. The slide deck's available to you, so you're able to pull that off. And to Mo, to answer your question, I would go and take a look at these guys first. Okay. So anybody, it's been a pleasure. I hope we've presented what you need. Cleo, I think hopefully we've done a good job for you. And
Everybody's been fantastic, everybody. Thank you so much.
Good. So everybody self-isolate, enjoy Netflix, watch lots of animation, keep my team busy. And good night from Michael's house. Okay?
Bye.
Bye. Ciao.